Hey everybody, it's Guy here. It's Saturday, June the 20th. I wanted to file a report from an experience that I had with plant medicine last night. This is going to be a very casual report, and I want to warn you right away that our dog is beside me here on the floor of the living room, and he's looking out the window, so sometimes he might bark at somebody walking by. So just a heads up. Yeah, this is a report that is going to be casual. I just wanted to get this recorded so that I don't forget certain things. And it's worth sharing, some of it. I was working with cannabis in an edible format. Over the course of the evening, I consumed 2 drinks, each of which contained 10 milligrams of THC, for a total of 20. And then later in the evening, I consumed a small piece of cannabis-infused chocolate. So for me, that was quite a lot, especially because the chocolate was more powerful than I thought it was going to be. But what happened was, I played the guitar for a long time, a couple of hours, I would say. And I had an experience of expanded consciousness while I was playing. So I was able to see patterns that I don't normally see. And I was playing a lot of patterns that I normally do play, but I was able to put pieces together that never went together before, if that makes sense. So that I was getting into this flow, going from the bottom to the top of the fretboard with ease, and sort of taking my time and playing with a different style than I've ever played before. It was absolutely magical. I learned so much. It's not for nothing that they call these teacher plants. I figure it's putting my mind in touch with some deeper archetypal aspect than it normally is connected with. I don't know how it works, but I guess another way to put it is I was accessing the super consciousness, as I call it. And so I was able to learn how to do things on the guitar that I might have taken me years to figure out, and I learned them in one evening. And I think I would be very comfortable now, just from what I learned last night, sitting with other musicians and improvising and being a lot more confident, because I know my way around the fretboard much more than I did before. And my style of playing has changed. Anyway, I'm not going to go on about that because most of you are not guitar players. I don't want to get too technical. But the next thing that happened was I put away the guitar because I became aware that I was deeply in the medicine. And I became aware that I was in hyperspace, as Terence McKenna used to put it. That's not to say that the room disappeared, but there was an overlay. Very hard to describe it. Everything looks like it's being seen through textured glass that has a specific design on it, kind of like scales, like fish scales, transparent. And things started appearing. One of the things that appeared was what I call the Buddha's jewels. They are these mostly circular, but not necessarily, shapes that appear in the visual space. And they are sparkling, and they have the most intense light that coming out of them. Very, very intense, not light from this realm. And the light is colored. Sometimes it's white, but it will have these mauve and purple and pink and blue and other violet tones shimmering. You can really see, as I've said before, in these things, where the decorations for the Persian mosques came from, with the beautiful designs and the geometry and everything. And these things appear, they have a certain lifespan, and then they deteriorate and kind of disappear, and then another one appears, things like that. And I had a lot of visionary experiences as well. And those visionary experiences were informed with a lot of this kind of beautiful geometry, the kind of thing that makes you want to cry. It's so heartbreakingly beautiful. And many times, and this went on for a couple of hours, many times I just would sit up and say, I'm having the privileged experience. In other words, it's God showing himself or herself or itself to me. Just seeing the pure essence of this most magical, divine expression of form and light. And then there were times when I felt that I was, let me put it this way. This world appeared to me as what it really is. And I'm going to modify that in a second. But this world appeared to me as it really is, which is to say a hallucination. It was self-evident that this is a self-dreaming hallucination that we're in. And when I say, I saw this or this appeared to me, that's not really what happened. What really happened was the not self, which is pure awareness, became aware of pure awareness. And in a sense, it would be a mistake, would have been a mistake for me to try to get myself out of the picture, because I just allowed, or there was an allowing of absolute reality, which is pure awareness, to experience itself. And my egoic self was on the sidelines watching. And all of that is metaphorical for a process that is alchemical, and I can't really find words for it, but it was like that. And then I received some teachings that were not so much verbal, although there was some verbal element to it, but I was shown. Don't ask me how, because it's impossible to describe, but essentially what I was shown is that our suffering comes from mind. I should say the mind, but I'm just going to call it mind, kind of like Muji does. All our suffering comes from mind, and I saw how that works. And the mind is always doing its job, which is to solve problems, to keep you safe, to look at the world in such a way that you have a roof over your head, you have clothing, you're fed. The mind is very task-oriented, and it's very much oriented toward affirming that this separate self exists and worrying about this separate self. And it's always busy. The worst thing you can do, once you realize that the mind is the cause of all suffering, is to try to get out of mind, because it's like quicksand. In other words, as you've heard in any kind of Dharma talk, what you seek is that which is seeking. It's a trap. So when you try to get out of mind to end your suffering, your attempt to get out of mind only affirms mind. It makes the problem worse. So what I learned last night is you have to just let the mind do what the mind does. Just don't put any energy into it. Just leave it be. And if it has thoughts, which it's going to have, just let it have thoughts. Don't sit there saying, oh, I've got to end all these thoughts to be free. Don't do that, because then you're just reaffirming the thoughts. Um, Interestingly, though, there were moments that were very profound in which I just picked up intuitively that awareness was becoming aware of itself as awareness throughout this whole experience. And then what was interesting was, just as I had come into a deeper understanding that you shouldn't try to get out of mind because it just makes the problem worse, I had this other revelation or self-realization, which is that this experience that we take to be real is the greatest gift you ever gave to yourself. And when I refer to self, I don't mean the small self, the egoic self. I mean what you really are, which is actually the whole thing. You are both the experiencer and the experience. And the greatest gift you gave yourself was hallucinating this entire world. And then the special magic trick was that this self-organizing hallucination imagines itself as a separate person in the hallucination and experiences the hallucination from the viewpoint of the hallucinated character that it takes to be real. So what I take to be me is part of the hallucination. But what's great about it is the hallucination thinks I'm a real person and that I'm alive and that I'm a separate being. This is the greatest gift I ever gave myself as the universe. It's incredibly poignant. It's the gift of a seeming real world, which is the very thing I'm trying to get out of. It's the very thing I'm trying to see through. Is kind of ruins the gift, if you will. But this is where holy men and holy women go. This is what they do. In other words, and I'm going to describe this through my practice, which I call the practice of ordinary life, the practice of daily life, the practice of ordinary living. You can call it different names. But what my practice is to take this life that I'm having, to not go to a monastery, to not go to an ashram, to not remove myself from the world, but to be as ordinary can be, to start with. And my goal is not specifically to become a spiritual person, because that's another trap. That's the spiritualized ego. But like holy men and holy women, what they're doing, framed in the terms of the yoga of everyday life, is they are fully experiencing this world as it is, while simultaneously being fully aware at all times that it's a dreamt reality. You get that? So they're fully in the world, experiencing it fully, sensing what the senses sense, feeling hot and cold, and the feel of clothing on your skin, and what water is like to drink. They're absolutely feet of clay. But what's different is they are simultaneously fully aware that it's a hallucination at all times. And I had a deep experience of that last night. I caught this sideways glimpse of reality, which that teacher plant can give you. and I saw how it is. And I saw the trap of how the mind tries to know what it is without realizing that this is what it is. This hallucination is a hallucination, but it's also reality. It's paradoxical. So you can never get out of it, per se. Now the ego, your egoic self, hears this as bad news and it resists it and it has a lot of objections, but. But my suggestion is the way to respond to this, let the mind spin its wheels. Let the mind ask these questions. But simply your work is to accept what is, to be with what is. The end of the suffering comes when you completely surrender to the fact that what is what is. Now, the dreamt character is going to have its obsessions and it's going to say, well, what are you telling me I should accept children being murdered in Gaza? See, that's what the mind does. Of course, I don't want children murdered in Gaza, but what I invite you to consider is I'm talking about a layer beneath this. No matter what's happening in the world, I'm talking about the layer that's more fundamental. And if you want to get free from suffering, you have to start by fully surrendering to what is, the way the world is exactly as it is, recognizing that that is your you, that is your true nature. There is no you really, there's just what is. And freedom comes from embodying that knowledge. It's just that simple. And what is doesn't care about your objections or your philosophy or your ideas of the soul and so on. Now, even though the egoic self doesn't like this message, there is a huge reward. And what it is bliss. It is a kind of bliss. It is a bliss of being with what is and not being deluded. Because then the delusion pulls us back to being asleep. And when I say being asleep, I mean thinking this is all real and being triggered by everything that's happening here as if it was real. My work is to be fully present here, be here now, but as much as possible, experience it through the heart and not the mind. Not that I'm trying to shut down the mind, but the heart mind is much better at being with what is. And this becomes a gateway to freedom, to liberation. This is what they mean when they talk about liberation. Because even though the mind does not like this message, because there's nothing in it for the mind, one of the payoffs is the bliss, and the bliss is associated with the recognition that awareness has, not you, awareness that there's no such thing as death. This, what is, goes on forever. I'm not saying this particular set of circumstances. Certainly this dreamt character dies in the dream. But this is the eternal now. This is already the afterlife in that sense. And organized religions distort this terribly. And they make that understanding a story about a separate soul that is you that goes somewhere. And things happen to it. And there's consequences of what you choose to believe and do in this life that determine what happens to that. I invite you to set all that aside. We're talking about a deeper level than all of that. See, your mind and my mind, my whole life, has distracted me with its concerns. And there's no peace there. There's no peace with the mind. It will always, always do what it does. We have to let awareness discover awareness and realize that it's all that there is. And it's always now. And everything is fundamentally made of consciousness. Paradoxically, there is a physical world, but it's being hallucinated, and that's what we normally don't see. And I'm going to wrap up by saying what I learned last night that I did not see before with such clarity is that even though the intellectual insight into understanding that this is a self-dreaming hallucination is very profound, the more profound insight is what I said before, that you, or in my case, me, this sense that there's an I that is a living being in a world is the greatest gift that it ever gave to itself, or that I ever gave to myself as God. So none of this is about getting out of being. It's a perspective then that when what being is understands itself, then it can move into a life of pure experience. You're probably going to become compassionate. You're probably going to live in love and from the heart. You are probably going to change a lot of things you do and how you go about things from this understanding. But don't set about making a series of tasks and think about what you're going to do when you're self-realized, because that's the mind appropriating it again. Let that go. This is not about what you're going to do after you become enlightened, because you're not going to become enlightened, and it has nothing to do with a change of activities. Again, be with what is. Just exactly the way it is, and say, there's nothing, you need to do this. It's the only way to get past the mind is to completely accept things the way they are. Have no desire to change anything. Let everything be the way it is. And then awareness will start to become aware of awareness. And then what you take to be you will live in the bliss of the not self and the knowledge that there is no death, because there was never anyone to die in the first place. Right now, you're getting that, you're receiving that through the intellect. The homework is to find a way to experience it experientially. It took me many years to figure out that the master plants were the missing ingredient for me. And then I found my way, after working with different ones, to a very specific master plant, which thankfully is legal now. And I'll just sign off by saying, one of the reasons I'm sharing this is not because I just care to randomly file a trip report. I'm sharing this way because this is the new way I'm doing my work. Because this is what society needs to know. Because we don't defeat the globalists and create a new society from the same consciousness that produced the mess that we are in the first place. We can't have a population of people who are hypnotized and under heavy mind control, as Jason Christoff might put it, and think that they're going to see through the tactics that the oligarchs use to manipulate them. It'll always be too late. I think that this master plan was made legal for the purpose that the oligarchs thought that an inebriated population would be easier to control. But I think they miscalculated, because I think that if people use this plant and others like it the way I do, you can discover it using it as a tool. With it, you can discover the nature of fundamental reality. And that inherently leads to a different type of conscious awareness, which is your best immunity against attempts to control you. So anyway, I'm noticing I'm almost half an hour with this talk. So my apologies for going for going on at length. As I like to say in my usual disclaimer, I'm not a professional presenter. I don't assume or even try to make these talks particularly entertaining. I just want to convey the content to you. I want to convey these ideas to you so that you can investigate them in your own life. And I swear, I think you're going to find in your own way, you're going to find these things that I'm saying are true, even though they might seem strange to you right now, or they might even offend your existing religious beliefs. I could get into that, but that's another talk, and that's a smarty pants conversation with academic references and things like that, and that's not what today's about. Today I was sharing some insights that can help you find your way to foundational reality. And that's what we need to do. Once you find your way to that, you start to see what a distraction most other things are that we do. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you again. And I don't know when I'll do the next one of these, but I'll see you in the next report.